I took office in October of 2019. In my first 15 months as president, there were 12 rail transportation worker fatalities. In fact, at one point, within that period, the railroad suffered a fatality and at least one amputation every month for 9 months straight. Today, very little has changed for the better. Undoubtedly, the railroads will have a message of an industry on the mend, but please be rest assured that nothing can be further from the truth. For the last 10 years, the railroads have averaged 8 fatalities per year. Last year there were 9, and while there may be brief lulls of those types of events, the data reveals a steady, consistent, and frightening trend. Currently, the rail carriers are hell-bent on risking further injury to their employees, as well as the American public and supply chain infrastructure by reducing or eliminating altogether the 2 crew members that control train movement in the cab of a locomotive. They will tell you that it is a matter of collective bargaining and that there is no data to support otherwise. I say to you, please do not be swayed. Safety is not, nor should it ever be, negotiable. I assure you, accidents are occurring on short lines and yard jobs that operate with less than a 2-person crew, but the rates and/or trends cannot be identified because the information is not captured. Similarly, all Class 1s over-the-road railroad operations are performed with no less than a 2-person crew today, so there is no other data to compare. In other words, the railroads have no idea what will happen if they reduce crew size, but it's a gamble they're willing to take for the sake of satisfying their insatiable appetite of improving their company's bottom line. What we do know from the data that we do have is that things are getting worse. A quick look at years 2020 through 2021 reveal an increase in total accidents and incidents from 8,792 to 9,192, and an increase in total employee injuries from 2,961 to 3,054. Make no mistake, it's railroad greed that I believe has caused this committee to call us here today. As you are aware, PSR was born from the pressure put forth by investors and shareholders on Wall Street. Since its advent, dramatic, haphazard cuts have decimated railroad resources. Approximately 33% of the Class 1 workforce was laid off more than a year before the first case of COVID had ever been identified. Locomotives were put in storage, and integral crafts with special skills that were relied upon to perform safety-critical inspections were eliminated from terminals across the country. Looking to the future, the trajectory for rail safety is alarming, especially if PSR continues with its status quo. Employees fortunate enough to have not been affected by the cuts are now voluntarily walking away from what was once the premier blue-collar job in the nation. As a result, the institutional knowledge the carriers are letting walk out the door will threaten rail safety for another generation to come. Exasperating this issue is the railroad's panic-driven effort to stop the PR nightmare they are currently facing for their majority contribution to the supply chain crisis. Included in this panic is the slashing of training programs for new hires so that the railroads can portray an improving number of workers, when in reality, all they are actually doing is providing the trainees with a deficient training program and a foundation built for failure. This is evidenced by multiple amputations and crushing injuries recently occurring to newly promoted conductors. Notably, FRA accident report measurements do not reflect amputations. They are reported the same as most any other injury. This needs to change. Also, a specialized study of the dangers in switching operations is warranted by the NTSB. The NTSB has never performed one of those specialized studies on switching operations, and now is the time, as most fatalities and amputations have occurred in the performance of switching operations. Compounding troubles in the rail industry is the fact that train lengths are growing, and so are the number of major derailments, each one another step closer to the inevitability of the big one. Also increasing are the number of block crossings, the outcry from public commuters, and the stories of first responders not being able to get to their destinations, while the victims, dependent upon their timely response, perish on the other side of the train. Long trains are also making very difficult work for the crews. Radio communications are insufficient for the lengths of the trains. Conductors and engineers regularly lose the ability to communicate, often stranding them from a cry for help or a much-needed train movement instruction to ensure the safest course. Long trains also expose our members to the elements for periods of time that would be unacceptable by OSHA and other industries, but somehow are permissible in rail. In closing, I would like to say this. I am on record as having said that the railroad industry is going to end up like Boeing. It's not just the accidents that I am referring to. It's a lack of oversight and concern for the railroad's constant capitulation to outside pressures that are creating the biggest dangers. I am not sounding the alarm here. I am screaming into the bullhorn for help. If left unchecked, it is my members who will end up maimed or killed, and it is America whose supply chain will end up collapsed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to your questions.